in the Realms of Mediumship by Chico Francisco Candido Xavier and inspired by the spirit Andre Luis. Chapter 10 Tormented Somnambulism. We returned to the main room. Donna Eugenia had just finished helping a poor recently discarnated brother who left the room under the fraternal control of the guards. We were kindly received by Clementino, who led us over to a young woman who was praying with a distinguished-looking gentleman in the small group of patients receiving assistance that evening. Caressing her head, Alice informed, "We will allow the manifestation of an unfortunate friend who is vampirizing her, not only in order to help him, but so that we may learn something about tormented somnambulism." I watched the young lady who was leaning toward the impeccably dressed man assisting her. The meeting's supervisor withdrew to oversee other activities, but Alice took his place and proceeded to explain the case with his characteristic kindness. Indicating the couple, he said, "They are husband and wife united in a redemptive trial." Just then, the spirit guards allowed the unfortunate spirit to enter. We were face to face with an obviously deranged discarnate. His dense perispirit bore all the signs of undisputable mental alienation. He had a vacant look in his eyes, a constricted face, undisguised anxiety. His presence would inspire repugnance and dread in anyone unaccustomed to caring for the sick. In addition to a head injury, he had a large ulcer on his throat. He lunged at the young woman like a big cat lunging at its prey. She began to scream, transfigured. However, her spirit had not left her body. It was she herself who was contorting and weeping convulsively, enveloped in the fluidic embrace of the spirit who had completely taken over her physiological vessel. Hot tears ran from her half-closed eyes. Her body had lost control like a boat at large, and her breathing had become wheezy and labored. She tried to speak, but her voice was an unpleasant whistle. Her vocal cords were incapable of articulating one intelligible sentence. At Clementino's direction, Raoul approached the duo in the afflictive encounter and applied magnetic energies to the medium's chest area. She then managed to speak in hoarse shouts. "Monstrous daughter! You're a criminal! A criminal! Nothing's going to save you. You will descend with me into the darkness to share my pain. I don't want any help. I just want to be with you so you will be with me. I'll never forgive you. I'll never forgive you." From convulsive weeping, he incomprehensibly began roaring in vengeful laughter. We couldn't tell if this was a victim lamenting his fate or a sarcastic clown. "Justice is mine," he shouted between the wheezes. "I'm my own advocate, and vengeance is my only recourse." Inspired by his benefactor, Raoul tried to renew the tormentor's attitude by speaking to him about the value and advantages of humility, forgiveness, understanding, and love, and while he continued counseling, we looked to our diligent guide. In answer to our first questions, Alice pointed out, "This is a dolorous case like that of thousands of people." "We can see," exclaimed Valerio, greatly impressed, "that it is our sister herself who is speaking and waving her arms." "Yes," affirmed the assistant, "but she is connected to her spirit companion brain to brain." "Will she be able to clearly recall what is happening?" I asked. "Not at all. The cells of her cerebral cortex are in complete disarray due to the influence of this unfortunate suffering spirit. In trances where there is a more direct union between her demented persecutor and herself, she falls into a deep hypnosis, like individuals magnetized during a demonstration on hypnotism. Immediately thereafter, she starts displaying his mental imbalances, and indicating the medium's throat, which had suddenly turned reddish and swollen, he continued. On those occasions, her glottis is temporarily altered. She cannot express herself except in a hoarse voice and broken syllables. That is because our tormented brother, to whom she is linked by extremely close ties, transmits his personal sensations to her, forcing her to display his way of being. "Their association is so entwined," said Ilario, "that I have to ask myself if they might not be two souls in one body, so to speak, like two distinct plants growing in the same pot. In her daily life, isn't our sister constantly and completely influenced, albeit indirectly, by her obsessing companion?" "You're right on track. At home, our friend is an enigma to her family. She is from a prominent background and acquired a wonderful cultural education. Her behavior, however, has always been rather shocking, revealing hidden imbalances. At first, she displayed unhappiness and melancholia, which led to nervous breakdowns and circulatory problems. Ill since puberty, renowned doctors tried in vain to diagnose her case until one particular surgeon believed her problem was an imbalance in the thyroid and submitted her to a delicate surgery. But her suffering remained unaltered. Soon thereafter, she met this gentleman who married her. He was convinced that marriage would be a healthful renewal for her. But her situation grew worse instead. She got pregnant early on in the marriage in accordance with a plan designed in the greater world. She was to receive her persecutor into her maternal arms to assist in his transformation and to help him find a new destiny. However, sensing his proximity, she recoiled in irrepressible fear, thereby displaying the work she needs to do. Impervious to the suggestions of her own soul, she rebelliously and violently caused a miscarriage. That frustration was the breach that gave her invisible enemy a more extensive influence in her marriage. The poor woman began to suffer frequent conversion disorder with a sudden aversion to her husband. She is assaulted by phenomenon of suffocation and anguish, especially at night, grieving her heartbroken mate. Doctors were consulted, but their sedatives were useless. The demented patient was committed, but insulin and electroshock therapy were ineffective. Presently, she's going through a period of rest at home, and her husband has decided to try the help of Spiritism. While Raul and Clementino attempted to calm the medium and the obsessor, united in a symbiosis of extreme desperation, Ilario and I eagerly sought further clarification. "What if she became pregnant again?" asked Ilario. "Yes," Alice agreed. "That would indeed be a blessing, but because of the web of conflicting sentiments resulting from her trying to escape her responsibilities, she cannot receive such a privilege for now." I recalled women who had become mothers in insane asylums, but catching my thoughts, Alice explained. Her condition of mental alienation does not deprive her of her natural physical capacities, but her premeditated cruelty in avoiding her commitments has imprinted a certain imbalance on her genital center. Our innermost defections, although unknown by others, harm our perispirit, and we cannot rush the time we need to recuperate, even if remorse helps us to restore our good intentions. The perfect interlocking of the psychophysical elements is associated with the mind. Corporeal life is the synthesis of the soul's radiations. Organs are not in harmony without balanced thoughts, just as there is no order without intelligence. The vengeful spirit yoked to the medium continued to be restrained by Clementino's assistance, while the young woman reflected his emotions and impulses. Her chest heaved, and she cried out in tears, "Nothing will help me. I'm a renegade." "Forgive, my brother, and your pathway will be renewed," replied Raul lovingly. "By forgiving, we ourselves are forgiven. All of us have debts. Wouldn't you like to help others so that you might be helped in turn?" "I can't. I just can't!" cried the wretch. And looking at the pair of suffering spirits in one body, Alice continued to explain. In order to calmly examine the anguish of obsession in tormented mediumship, we mustn't forget that the causes of today's suffering are rooted in the shadows of yesterday. Spiritist centers are teeming with moving dramas that are connected to the remote and near past. Indicating the couple, he continued. In the past, her current husband was a harmful companion. He talked her into poisoning her adopted father, her present persecutor. Heiress to a considerable fortune as a sole adoptive daughter, she found out that her father planned to change his will. This happened in an aristocratic mansion in the last century. The wealthy widower, who had raised her with loving care, did not agree with her choice. He disliked the young man because he seemed more interested in pillaging his wealth than in making the naive and senseless girl happy. So the father tried to get her away from her fiancé's influence, to no avail. Indignant, he was taking legal measures to disinherit her when the young man exploited her passion for him and talked her into eliminating her father by giving him continuous doses of sedatives. Her old father deteriorated after 2 weeks of the wrong medication, and his death was achieved with only a minute dose of a corrosive substance. After a brief period of mourning, the young heiress made her new husband rich, but soon she found herself disillusioned. It wasn't long before her husband revealed himself to be a compulsive gambler and confessed libertine, relegating her to profound mental and physical misery. This form of gradual destruction wasn't enough, however. Her discarnate father attached himself to her with a burning desire for revenge, subjecting her to horrible inner torments, On earth, the patricide may have remained concealed, but it was recorded in the divine tribunals, and a long effort of expiation has been in effect. For here and now, we are still observing this trio of consciences, interlaced in the delacerating threads of redemptive trial. The wretched persecutor was taking in Raoul's loving admonishing, and after a short break, Alice continued. As we can see, our sister's illness is rooted in the distant past. She roamed around for a long time in the lowest zones of the spirit world, in the vibratory field of her victim's hate. Her father had become her vengeful creditor, and now, in her existence, her mind is entangled with his. She went through childhood and adolescence experiencing his persecution from afar. However, when his enemy from the past reappeared as her current husband, with the task of helping and re-educating her, and when she wavered at her first attempt at maternal responsibility, the obsessor took advantage of his magnetic control over her and dashed her equilibrium. Moved by the picture of justice playing out in front of us, we couldn't avoid asking more questions to better grasp the lesson. Ilario turned his attention to the victim's loving husband and considered. So our friend here has his own debt to pay to his sick wife. Undoubtedly, Alice confirmed gravely. Divine power doesn't place at one another's side without a just cause. In marriage, at home or at work, we are sought out through our affinities in order to satisfy the imperatives of the law of love, whether to amplify the good or to redeem our debts resulting from our deliberate contact with evil. Our sister suffers the effects of her crime of patricide resulting from her desire to enjoy pleasures that ended up disrupting her conscience, and the one who inspired that deplorable action has been called on to help her make amends. I gazed at the downcast gentleman and pondered the frustration he must be feeling. That was enough for Alice to explain solicitously. Of course, our friend is not at all happy. Recapitulating his old desire for sensations, he reapproached the woman he married, instinctively seeking the partner of his passionate venture of the past. Instead, he found the sick sister, who makes him ponder and suffer. Examining this case for our studies, said Hilario, can we still regard her as a medium? Why not? She is a medium undergoing an afflictive process of readjustment. She will probably be a patient in need of love and care for a few more years. Imprisoned by the fluidic web of her demented adversary, she is purifying herself by means of the complications of tormented somnambulism. Thus, for now she is an instrument for the development of patience and goodwill in this group of workers, but without any perspective of immediate production in the area of assistance. After all, she is in extreme need of fraternal assistance herself. But even now, I added, her presence here is not useless. Not in the slightest, added the instructor. First of all, she and her husband are a valuable focus of work, enabling our fellow co-workers to improve their qualities as sowers of the light. In addition, the impact of the counseling is not lost. From evening to evening, from meeting to meeting, in the intimacy of prayer and constructive counseling, our trio of souls will renew themselves bit by bit. The persecutor will understand the need to forgive in order to get better, and the patient will strengthen herself in spirit for her recovery, and the husband will acquire patience and serenity in order to be truly happy. At this point, with the help of the center's spirit friends, the obsessor was removed from the psychic environment of the young woman, who returned to normal. In answer to our questioning look, Alice remarked, "When our brother Clementino invited us to observe this case, he undoubtedly wanted to highlight the imperatives of work and tolerance, understanding and kindness for the building of wholesome mediumship in the world. Mediums are found everywhere, but few of them have freed themselves from their somber past to serve the common cause of humankind in the present, without the enigmas of their particular pathway. And since no one advances with all possible serenity without paying the debts left behind, we must tolerate and help, edifying through good deeds." Our conversation was suddenly interrupted. Clementino, ever diligent, called us to help out with another case.